Good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's Bellwether District Community Meeting. We'll get started in just a few minutes. Thanks for joining. If you've just entered the meeting, thanks for joining our Bellwether District Community Meeting. We'll get started in just a few moments. Okay, let's get started. Good evening. Welcome to our second community meeting of the year. For those joining us for the first time tonight, my name is Mia Fioravanti. I am Senior Vice President of Corporate Affairs for the Bellwether District. Before we get started, I want to share a quick reminder of how we'll conduct Q&A tonight. If you have questions throughout the meeting, please enter them into the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. We will take as many questions as we can until about 7 p.m. this evening. To ensure we get through as many questions as possible, we'll limit questions to one question per person. If we don't get to your question, we will post responses to both answered and any unanswered questions to the website following the meeting. As a reminder, recordings and presentations from all recent meetings can be found at thebellwetherdistrict.com under the community section. And as always, please feel free to contact us via our web form located at thebellwetherdistrict.com/contact. And if you have any topics you'd like us to cover in our remaining 2026 meetings, we'd love to hear from you. Next slide. Our agenda tonight will cover leasing, development, environmental remediation, and community and workforce updates. Next slide. Before we get started, we always share how this project will benefit the city of Philadelphia and the surrounding region over the next decade. We anticipate a more than $4 billion investment in the redevelopment of the site and a significant amount of tax revenue for both the city and Commonwealth. We're continuing to invest in our neighboring communities with a focus on South and Southwest Philly and have contributed more than $3 million to date in community and workforce development initiatives. Excitingly, we're expecting over 20,000 construction jobs and over 10,000 permanent jobs to be created over the next 10 to 15 years. We're making a significant investment in reconnecting the site to the neighboring street grid and in both on-site and off-site infrastructure. And last, there's an environmental benefit to the work we're doing. We're building the site to LEED certifiable standards, planting over 10,000 trees, over 1,000 of which have been planted to date. And just by completing the demolition of the former site in 2024, which we completed in 2024, the city's Office of Sustainability reported a 16% reduction in carbon emissions citywide, which is very substantial. So exciting things underway at Bellwether. For now, I'll turn things over to my colleague Amelia to share some leasing updates.
All right, hi everyone. Just for those who don't know me already, my name is Amelia Alcivar. I lead our corporate affairs practice, so I'm a colleague with Mia on our corporate affairs team. Just a couple of quick tenant updates. Again, some folks who were on our first meeting might know this already, but for those who are new, we are currently in the process of completing a 1.4 million square feet build to suit for our first tenant of the site, the entire site and first tenant for our industrial campus. The company is called Drink Pack. They are a third-party canned beverage manufacturer based in California, and this will be their first East Coast facility. It'll serve as their flagship facility, distributing to the entire East Coast. Drink Pack does the canning process, right? They do not manufacture the cans. They actually put the beverages in the cans for, dozens of brands that are household names across the country, and they do so with a very innovative and kind of advanced manufacturing process. Once this, and if anyone, for those who are local, if you're driving along 26th Street, this is the very large building you can see going up right along 26th Street. It's the walls are all constructed, the roof is going in, and then we begin the process of fitting out the interior of the building for their operations. DrinkPack has in their initial phase of the project, and they anticipate additional expansion within the facility, will create an anticipated 174 permanent jobs. They are committed to pursuing local hiring initiatives, so they're working on that now. We expect more announcements to come soon. And we expect to achieve substantial completion of this building in May of 27. And kind of a cool stat is that when the Drink Pack building is complete, it will be the largest manufacturing building constructed in Philadelphia, right here at the Bellwether District. We are proud that this project won Deal of the Year from the Philadelphia Business Journal for 2025, and this was announced in December. Go ahead, the next slide. All right, and then the next tenant, our second tenant at the Bellwether District, and the first tenant for our innovation campus, where we're focused on innovation, tech, and life science leaders, is TerraPower Isotopes. TerraPower Isotopes is a national leader in producing ingredients for advanced cancer treatments. They produce a ingredient called actinium-225, which is a radioisotope. Many people might be familiar with the idea of radiation to treat cancer. This ingredient is able to be administered directly to patients and target cancer cells individually versus and avoid some of the side effects that are associated with traditional radiation treatment. So it really is what we see as the future frontier of cancer treatment, and we're very excited to have that happening right here in Philadelphia at the Bellwether District. Their project's expected to create 225 permanent jobs and about 500 construction jobs. And that is if you are driving along 76 north of Passyunk Avenue, that's the building. There's not a whole lot of building there, but that's the construction site that you'll see as an active site along that 76 corridor. And that was announced in March, and we held our groundbreaking for that facility just a couple of weeks ago. And that's about 250 square feet. You can see a rendering of it here on this slide. And I will go ahead and pass it to our next speaker.
Thanks, Amelia. For everyone that doesn't know me, I work on the industrial development team here at Bellwether. My name is Kurt Carter, and I'm going to be taking you through the next couple of slides in the presentation tonight. So obviously we like to go back and touch on some of these schedule items. If there's anybody new that hasn't been with us before, just a little bit of a recap on some of these items, and then give you a little bit of what's to come as well. So right at the top, we do have our demolition activities in the purple color. We did substantially complete demo back in 2024, and that was a massive undertaking ever since we had closed on the property. The second bar that you see in gray is the remediation activities. Those have been ongoing and will be ongoing for the foreseeable future, and that's definitely woven into the fabric of our redevelopment efforts. The next bar is the blue industrial line. So we were able to start construction all the way back in Q1 of 2024, and we completed our phase one vertical construction, which was actually 2 buildings in Q4 2025. And as Amelia had just mentioned, we did start construction on building 3, which is the Drink Pack building, in Q2 2026. And we do anticipate a substantial completion event on that building in just a year, so Q2 2027. And we are very excited to get that up and running. The next line is the orange line, which takes us further north to the innovation campus. So we did start earthwork on that campus back at the beginning of 2024, completed that earthwork at the end of 25, and are also started the vertical building up there on the TerraPower Isotopes asset that Amelia had touched on. And we are looking at a substantial completion event the same time as building 3. So it's really great for us to be able to work both of these initial leases for each campus in tandem, and we're really excited to be able to open them in the beginning months of 2027. And finally, community engagement. Obviously, every quarter we have these meetings to be able to get the word out and take any questions that may have arisen. Next slide. So just to reorient everybody, this is our overall campus map. As you can see in this master plan, up to the north, everything north of Passyunk Avenue is our innovation campus, and that's represented by 250 acres of land. We do anticipate there will be plus or minus 3 to 4 million square feet created on that portion of the campus. And we do envision roughly 8,500 jobs that would come to that portion. And then as we keep moving south, below Passyunk Ave, that is what we had slated for the industrial campus, which is just about 750 acres. And we're envisioning about 10.5 million square feet on that portion of the site, with also roughly 10,500 jobs at full build out. So pretty exciting stuff to come. Next slide. And next again. So in order to kick off all of this vertical work, we did have to start with the earthwork. So I'll start with the graphic over on the right side. Essentially, everything in blue is represented as complete. So that blue does span multiple phases. And then the areas that remain in the light tan color are in progress right now. And we are hopeful that most of those will be done by 2026. The last piece, all the way to the south, right inside the red box, will likely be 2027, unless there's a tenant need that would move that forward before the end of this year. So just to recap, over on the left, we are complete phase 1 of mass earthwork. We are complete phase 2 of subgrade demo. And then within phase 2, our parcels C2G and H2 are also substantially complete, which only leaves us final completion for that phase 2 earthwork program. So I think before we go to the next slide, the interesting stat here is that we've moved over 3 million cubic yards of soil on the site so far, which is a really impressive undertaking in and of itself. Next slide. So just to follow up on the narrative, here are some progress photos. So starting in the top left, these are some of the future phases that we will be building. This is parcel C2 in the top left. Top right is another view of parcel C2, and you can kind of orient yourself there with the bridge in the background and then some of the aerial assets on the PGW property. And then as we move down on the page, this is further down in our site. This would be really portions of H1 in our phasing. So you can see a lot of the land already graded, prepared, some stormwater management assets that are temporary in place to be able to handle some rainwater. And we look to continue on with the building programs in line with this mass earthwork program. Next slide. So this brings us into some of the infrastructure that we've had to work on to be able to service these buildings with roads and utilities. So again, starting with the graphic, the red outline on the right is our first phase of on-site improvements. That included utility improvements and services for the buildings, as well as new roadways on Hartranft East and Francis Harper North. The blue phase is our phase 1 offsite improvements. So that included widening 26th Street, adding additional lanes and traffic control devices to make sure that we could accommodate a large number of trips and make sure that everybody is moving through the adjacent arterials safely. And then the yellow phase is an upcoming phase, which is our phase 2 on-site improvements. And this phase of work will be broken into sub-phases because it's really tenant dependent at this point in time. So the next phase we'll be working on is the access road and utility extensions for the drink pack build. So just to rehash on the left side there, we have completed all of our on-site roadway and street lighting. The off-site roadway actually is complete now. It was ongoing when we had updated this. We performed natural gas relocations to be able to create buildable lots and put the natural gas lines in the future streets. Traffic signal installation on 26th Street to help with some of those flows, and then that final paving on 26th Street as well. So really looking forward to this next phase of infrastructure deliveries. Next slide. So as we talked about, these are some aerial photos of some of the widenings on 26th Street. So starting top left, for everyone who had kind of sat in traffic heading southbound on 26th Street when it was formerly only 3 lanes, you can see now it's 5 lanes, and it is stoplight controlled to allow efficient movements to be able to get traffic to and from origins and destinations. Top right is the new widened intersection at Hartramp Street, which will serve as our main intersection. And then the bottom photo is really similar to the first photo. It's just from that southern angle, looking northbound to be able to see some of those extra movements down at the new intersection. Next slide. So this is just a little bit of a different angle on the Hartramp intersection on 26th Street. The interesting part for us is that, the top left photo is a rendering of how we envision 26th Street and Hartramp intersection looking at the beginning of the project. And then the top right is that street actually built in real life. So you can see the 4 lanes coming out, 2 lanes going in, and then the widening onto the property to be able to handle those extra flows. And then the bottom photo is just another zoomed in picture that kind of captures a little bit of a wider lens of the 26 and Penrose intersection with some of the new landscape that was put in on that west side. Next slide. So this brings us to some of the vertical improvements that we had touched on in the schedule. This is our first building, which is a 326,000 square foot cross dock building. Again, that top left photo is a conceptual rendering, and then the top right is what is built in the field today. So really strong likeness between those two, and we take a lot of pride in making that original vision come to life in the field. The bottom left gives you a great interior view of what a cross-dock Class A industrial facility looks like, and it's ready for a tenant at this point. So everything is fully complete, and we are out in the market looking for tenants to occupy this building. Next slide. So this is building 2. Again, similar theme. The top left photo is a conceptual rendering of this building, and then the top right is the actual building out in the field. So again, very strong likeness between those two, the design and the real version. You can see some of the differences on the inside with the paint colors and some of the layouts. This building is also roughly 2 times the size of that first building. So this is a 727,000 square foot cross dock Class A industrial building. And then the photo on the bottom right is just a nice aerial photo that captures some of the rest of South Philly in the Navy Yard area, as well as some of our stormwater management assets in the foreground. Next slide. So this brings us to the third and final building. Again, top left is a conceptual rendering. This rendering is very similar to the building 2 rendering. This is a build to suit for drink pack, like Amelia touched on before. So this may not mirror our vision as much as we anticipated, only because when the tenants are involved for the build, they elect some different design parameters than what may have originally been envisioned. On the bottom left, you can see some of the larger earthwork areas that are going in commensurate with the building. And then on the bottom right, you can see a really great progress photo of a lot of the wall bracing that's up, which is required for safety measures. And then you can see the structural steel going in as the roof decking is being extended to the south. So really great progress on this building. We are in very good shape versus a lot of the schedules, and we are excited to be able to deliver this in just around a year's worth of construction. So with that, I will pass it on to the next presenter, Amanda Mazey.
Hi, and thanks, Kurt. My name is Amanda. I'm the Director of Mixed Use, and I focus specifically on the Innovation Campus. And so I'm going to take you guys through the update on our new tenant, TerraPower Isotopes, and specifically what we have planned on the site. Next slide, please. So just to orient everyone and zoom in to the Innovation Campus, the total campus size is approximately 250 acres, and we're currently planning between 3 and 4 million square feet of development at full build out. The site is located north of Passyunk Ave, just south of University City and Pennovation. 34th Street actually comes directly down from University City and Pennovation and dead ends at our site right now. We are also situated between Schuylkill River to the west and I-76 to the east. Next slide. As Mia mentioned earlier and Amelia, we're excited to have officially announced our first tenant at the Innovation Campus, the nuclear science company called TerraPower Isotopes. In April, we broke ground on their new 250,000 square foot build-to-suit manufacturing facility, which marks a major milestone for our campus. TerraPower Isotopes, or TPI, plans to invest approximately $450 million into the project, and this location will serve as their flagship manufacturing facility. We are building the core and shell, which will take approximately 12 months and be completed in Q2 of next year. And then the full build out of the facility will be complete in 2029. Next slide. So this slide provides an overview of our master plan, also specifically kind of focusing on TerraPower Isotopes. But this shows kind of the current site and the infrastructure improvements that are planned as part of our phase one. So the phase one that we're specifically focused on encompasses building A, TerraPower in the center, and then building C down below. We do not yet have tenants for the two future buildings in our phase one. And then everything west of Fortin Way shown on this plan is a future phase of our master plan. So the phase one includes several key off and on-site infrastructure upgrades. Starting with the off-site improvements, we will be converting Vare Avenue to two-way traffic, as indicated by the number 1. It's kind of in the lower right corner. And implementing and widening the roadway improvements along there leading up to Maiden Lane, which is indicated by number 2. On site, we'll be constructing 2 new roads that will establish the framework of the future campus. So we have Fortin Way, which goes north-south, and then Jackson Street, which goes east-west, as indicated by 5 and 6 on this map. We will also be constructing new intersections at Jackson Street and Vare Avenue, and then also Fortin Way and Maiden Lane. And then finally, as part of this phase, we'll also be constructing the amenity center, which is shown as number 7 along Fortin Way. If you go to the next slide. So just zooming in a little more specifically on the TPI building. So just kind of trying to orient everyone on exactly how the site's going to lay out. So the primary entrance and kind of like the main entrance to the building will be along Fortin Way to the west, as indicated by number 1. In the next slide, we'll show you kind of what the renderings look like, but this is kind of the main entrance. Surface parking is provided on both sides of the building, with visitor parking located to the west and employee parking located to the east. At the main entrance on the west, there'll be a landscape plaza and a vehicular drop-off and turnaround area, kind of creating a very welcoming arrival experience for the visitors and employees. In addition to the primary entrance, there's also a secondary entrance along Jackson Street. And then the main employee entrance is kind of around back at the on the east side of the building. And then, as I said before, as part of this development, we're also delivering a separate amenity building located across Fortin Way. Next slide. So this slide kind of just highlights a few renderings that illustrate the vision for the future facility and the surrounding campus environment. So starting with rendering number 1, this view looks west down future Jackson Street corridor. It showcases the new two-way grade separated bike lanes that will enhance connectivity throughout the campus. So on all of our on-site new streets, they'll all have these two-way grade separated buffered protected bike lanes that will we're working to kind of weave into the larger bike network. So on Vare Avenue and Maiden Lane, where we're widening the streets, we're also going to be adding, specifically on Vare Avenue, we'll be adding a bike lane as well. That will kind of fit into the larger bike network framework around the site. And then moving to rendering at number 2. So this image focuses on the main entrance to the TPI facility. So in the foreground, you can see the landscaped arrival plaza with the vehicular drop-off loop, and then the kind of glassy entrance that kind of marks the main entry into the facility. And then finally, the rendering number 3 highlights the future amenity center located along Fortin Way. So this building is complemented by an outdoor landscape plaza and will serve as a gathering space for employees, visitors, and future campus tenants. Next slide. And then finally, this next image shows the before and after of our site. So this slide is a little dated right now. It's from earlier this year at the completion of mass grading. So we have I-76 in the foreground, along with the current configuration of Mass Ave, and then our site in the background. This is looking west towards West Philly. And if you go to the next slide. And finally, this next slide shows the future condition. So this is what I had walked everyone through previously. So this is the new intersection of Jackson Street and Vare Avenue that leads to the new TPI facility highlighted in blue. So this shows the on-site, the parking lots, the new building, the future buildings A and C, which hopefully we'll have tenants able to announce sometime soon. And then just an ideal rendering of beyond phase 1, what the next phases of development could look like. And then finally, I'm going to hand it off to Chris, who will kind of take you through exactly what's happening on site right now.
Thanks, Amanda. You can go to the next slide. So for those who don't know me, my name is Chris Draper. I'm Vice President of Construction Management, so I'm handling all of the execution and construction related activities as it relates to TPI. As Amanda mentioned and Amelia mentioned as well, this facility is a 250,000 square foot facility that broke ground in late April of this year. So we're about 6 to 7 weeks through our construction process. So what you are seeing on the screen is sort of the most recent aerial photo that was taken. You can kind of see that all of our mass grading and initial site enabling work has been completed at this point. So cuts and fills and movement of soil to get to elevations that are prepared for roadways, utility excavations, foundations of the building. Basically in initial phases of construction. So you can sort of see that, the lighter soil color that's in the larger photo is, the outline of the building. So you can start to see, where the building is going to take shape and where it's going to be positioned. Current site activities outside of, cuts and fills and grading of the existing soil is ground improvements. So we are basically compacting and solidifying the ground below the building to ensure that, it meets the proper design criteria to support the weight of the building itself. Next stage after this work will be excavation for footings and foundations. So that's scheduled to start in early July. And then probably around middle to end of October is when our precast panels are ready to be installed. So the site condition will be like this for, most of the summer and into the early parts of the fall, and then the building will start to go vertical right around the end of October. And then core and shell is planned to wrap up in Q2 of 2027, at which point the tenant will take over the building itself and work on the interior fit up for the better part of the rest of the year and into 28. And with that, I will pass it off to Juliana Connolly.
Thanks, Chris. You can go to the next slide. Hi, everyone. My name is Juliana Connolly, and I lead environmental remediation activities for HRP Group, including here in Philadelphia at the Bellwether District. And whenever I talk about remediation activities at the Bellwether District, I need to first talk about the fact that there are two responsible parties at the site. So two responsible parties for the cleanup of the site. One of those parties is ourselves, the Bellwether District, formerly PESRM, so formerly Philadelphia Energy Solutions Refining and Marketing, or you'll also hear us referred to as HRP Group. And then the other responsibility is Evergreen or Sunoco, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with the many, many decades of work Evergreen has been doing to clean up the site, both before and after our ownership of the property. This slide just sort of sums up generally, there's a lot of details that aren't here, but generally what each of us is responsible for. So Bellwether Districts, we're responsible for contamination that occurred at the property after September 2012. So releases to the soil, to the groundwater at the site that occurred after September 2012. The reason for that is the refinery itself was sold from Sunoco to PESRM in September 2012. That's why that date is important. HRP Group didn't acquire the property until later, until June of 2020, but were responsible for any contamination that occurred from September 2012 onward. And there are some specific release areas that we know about, and I'll talk more about that in a few slides, that did occur during that period. So in the last 14 years or so, we're responsible for that. We're also responsible for any regulatory reporting or anything associated with getting to regulatory closure for those releases that occurred after September or in September 2012 and after. We're also responsible for all of the sampling, the soil and the groundwater sampling beneath all of the former above ground storage tanks that those of you that are familiar with the property may remember. There used to be many, many dozens of huge above ground storage tanks that we've taken down as part of that regulatory closure of those tanks. We need to sample the soil and groundwater, and I'll talk more about that. We also are responsible for management of the soil during our redevelopment. You heard my colleague Kurt talk about how we've moved huge volumes of soil at the property. And the reason for that movement is to get to the necessary elevations for our redevelopment. So some areas were at higher elevation, some areas were at lower elevation. We needed to move the soil around. And we're responsible for making sure that that soil is managed appropriately during our construction, and I'll talk more about that in a subsequent slide. We are also responsible for what's called vapor intrusion, assessment, and mitigation. And so vapor intrusion is the potential for vapors in the soil or in the groundwater, so chemicals that can turn into the gas phase Vapor intrusion is the potential for those to move into the indoor air, and we don't want that to happen because in the indoor air is where people can breathe them. We're responsible for that vapor intrusion assessment and mitigation, and I'll talk more about that in a couple of slides. But those are the things that HRP, Bellwether District, is responsible for. Evergreen remains responsible for cleanup of contamination that was already in the ground before September 2012. And that really, Evergreen treats the site as one large site, and many of you are following their cleanup as well. And they're moving the whole former refinery through the Act 2 process. Some of you may be following those reports. There's remedial investigations, there's cleanup plans, and ultimately we get to, under Act 2, what's called a final report once all of the work is completed. So both HRP and Evergreen is moving the site through this Act 2 program. And I'll talk more about how our redevelopment sort of works in coordination with Evergreen's cleanup through things like engineering controls and vapor intrusion mitigation systems. You can go to the next slide. So I'll start with the above ground storage tanks. As I mentioned, there were many dozens of above ground storage tanks present at the site. And when we take those down, we are required by regulation to sample the soil and the groundwater beneath where those tanks were. And the reason for that is just to make sure the tanks are large, for any of you that remember them, that there wasn't contamination that occurred under there that nobody just sort of, people couldn't see until the tanks came down. That's sort of the idea of it. Because there were so many tanks at this property, we grouped them into different tank groups, and that's what this different color-coded shading is showing on this figure. And so we'd group them together just for the regulatory reports. If you want to see any of the details of this sampling, that information is all available on our website. At this point, we have regulatory closure for 7 of the 9 tank groups, and there's 2 that we're waiting on the department's review of our regulatory submittals. So that process has been going along really for the last sort of 6 or so years as the tanks were demolished, as we sampled underneath them and then did all this data analysis and reporting. But that is all available on our website. If anyone wants to look in more detail at that, you can go to the next slide. So I mentioned that Bellwether District is responsible for cleanup of releases that occurred after, or sort of in September 2012 or after. This figure shows the locations where we're aware of releases that occurred after that date. So each of these stars indicates a place where HRP, or Bellwether District, is taking a portion of the site through that Act 2 program. And so that's a way to think about it, is the releases that have occurred after September 2012 are sort of more discrete. I can show them as a localized area on the figure because people remember when they occurred, people were there. We're not talking about 100 years of industrial history. We're just talking about the last 14 years. Versus when you see Evergreen talk about their cleanup approach for the site, they're talking more broadly about the whole former refinery. What the color coding indicates here, the purple or the green, is green in with the shaded out labels indicates that's an Act 2 release area where we've already gotten to regulatory closure. So we've submitted all of the necessary reports to the Department of Environmental Protection, and they've approved our final report. The purple ones are those that are still in process. And I have very exciting news. This evening, we just heard that one of our locations that's shown as purple here, an area we refer to as the number 3 separator release area, we just today received approval from the department that our final report there has also been approved. You can go to the next slide. So that's actually the first line of this table here. This table is now out of date as of about an hour and a half ago. That number 3 separator release area that I mentioned is a release that we know occurred in 2013, or we believe it occurred in 2013, We've implemented a remedy there. We've submitted regulatory reports to the department, and that final report was just approved today. The rest of this table sort of summarizes the status of those Act 2 areas that on the prior slide were still showing as purple, so still open. For the most part, we're working through data analysis and regulatory reporting at this point. For the last couple of years, we had been aggressively remediating a couple of these areas, but we're now at the point where that active remediation is largely complete, and we're in sort of that post-remediation monitoring and reporting stage of the process for the most part. You can go to the next slide. So soil management is something that I mentioned is HRP's responsibility. And I'm going to talk more about this during this meeting than some of you may have heard us discuss in the past, because we've sort of now come on our first two lots, sort of all the way through our soil management sort of scope. And this is how I would think about it. Our soil management scope begins with sampling soil before we move it. The reason we want to sample it before we move it is because we want to know what's in it so that when we do move it, we can plan accordingly and place the soil appropriately based on the level of chemical concentrations in the soil. So the first phase is sampling before we move it. The next phase, which is a long phase, is the moving the soil and the planning around moving the soil and the documenting that the soil is placed in locations that are acceptable. And what I mean by that is depending on the level of concentration in a certain volume of soil, that soil needs to be placed either under a barrier that would in the future prevent people from being able to come into regular contact with it. Or the soil may need to be placed a certain distance away from the river to make sure that we're not causing leaching into the river. So the soils with lower concentration can be in areas that are potentially accessible in the future, and the soils with higher concentrations need to be placed in areas that are sort of away from the river and under development features that will prevent contact in the future. And that's what we would refer to broadly as an engineering control or a soil cap, is a structure at the surface. So it could be a roadway, it could be a building slab, it could be a sidewalk. That would be an engineering control as part of the remediation that would keep people from touching the soil underneath. So for example, if we had lead in the soil at the site, which we do, we would look at the data before we moved the soil. We would say, okay, the concentrations in this soil are higher, the concentrations in this soil are middle, the concentrations in this soil are lower. And then our contractors, in coordination with our consultants, make decisions about where the soil can go so that we make sure in the new location where the soil ends up, the soils with the higher concentrations are beneath a development component that can serve as an engineering control. And I'll show more about that on the next slide. But just anyone who wants to see all these specifics, as we complete each of these lots, we'll have a report that we call an environmental construction completion report that we put on our website, and we submit it to DEP, and we share it with Evergreen, that documents that we've come all the way through this soil management process. The last phase of the soil management process, so again, we start with sampling before we move it. We track the soil and we plan and we make decisions while we're moving it. And then at the end, in any areas of a lot that are not covered with asphalt or a building slab, in areas that are landscaped, for example, we come back in and we sample that soil to make sure, sort of to double check that our planning worked, that any soils that remain accessible, that the concentrations in those soils are low enough that they don't pose a risk should anyone come and stick their hand in the soil in the landscaped area. You can go to the next slide. So this is just an example of a figure. This is Unit 1, which you saw Kurt walked through the renderings and the photographs of earlier. I wasn't sure that I believed that the rendering and the photograph really were not one and the same. But this is that unit one, which is now complete. This is actually an older aerial photograph. But what you can see here are through the shading, the orange area is showing areas that are now covered with a driveway or asphalt of some kind. So that asphalt is serving as an engineering control. You can see the building is covering areas of soil. The areas that are shaded green are areas that are landscape. There may be trees, there may be grass, and then these red dots that you see are locations where we came in after the soil was moved. So after the soil was managed and sampled the soil again to confirm that the soil concentrations are acceptable for them to be present in these landscaped areas. And all of that information is documented on that environmental construction completion report that I mentioned, and the path is on the prior slide. As I mentioned, we shared this information with Evergreen, and eventually Evergreen will use this information and they're in support of their final reports for the site. So as I mentioned earlier, our redevelopment is really coordinated with Evergreen's cleanup. So our development components are worked into Evergreen's cleanup plan and will eventually support that regulatory closure. And we need to make sure that we're tracking the soil and have all the documentation we need to show that. You can go to the next slide. So vapor intrusion mitigation is another thing that I mentioned. We don't want vapors from the subsurface moving into the indoor air. This is a simple schematic of how that works, which is essentially, if you look on the building on the left, there's an orange system sort of shown. Essentially what we're doing is we're just collecting air under the building slab and venting it to the roof. So it's just sort of short circuiting, no way for those vapors to move into the building. On the right, the schematic on the right is showing just a vapor mitigation membrane where you apply a membrane, so a heavy plastic that just forces vapors around. So for the most part, we're using the mitigation system on the left. So far, that is all we've done in the buildings that have been constructed, but both of these are feasible mitigation measures for vapor intrusion. And you can go to the next slide. And the last thing I'll talk about also has to do with air, but not indoor air, outdoor air. During all of our construction at the Bellwether District, we are continuously monitoring outdoor air for both dust and volatile organic compounds, total volatile organic compounds. We monitor for those constituents in real time, and our staff on site are alerted in real time if concentrations start to creep up. And the reason that's important is that if they start to creep up, we know that we can take action. We can alert our contractor. We can say, we need you to get more water out here to mitigate this dust. So it allows us to be very proactive and respond in real time versus waiting, getting data, 2 weeks later, and then you can't come back and undo anything. And the figure here is just showing the locations of those monitoring points. So we have 6 monitoring points on the industrial campus and 4 in the north and the innovation campus, and each of those is monitoring continuously. And I'll hand it back over to Mia.
Thank you so much, Juliana. I will close out tonight's meeting by sharing an update on our community and workforce development initiatives. On this slide here, you'll see a photo from our annual scholarship luncheon with the Community College of Philadelphia. Next slide. So again, just sharing a quick snapshot of our community-facing activities since our last meeting. As I mentioned, we spent time with our CCP scholarship recipients, all of whom are South and Southwest residents attending CCP. It's always something we, really look forward to. During the month of April, as we do every year, we announced our Touchdowns for Sustainability grants. through which awards are provided to environmentally focused organizations and initiatives. And that amount of funding is tied to the number of touchdowns scored in the previous Eagle season. So this year, our recipients were Fairmount Park Conservancy to support summer programming in South and Southwest Philly, including community movie nights and music series. Bartram's Garden to support their new Float Lab project, which is a public art installation and community space alongside Bartram's and our site along the Schuylkill River. Schuylkill River Greenways, which that grant went to support their America 250 Philly Flotilla, which is taking place on July 11th. It's a paddling event highlighting the historic role of the Schuylkill River and Fort Mifflin during the Revolutionary War. Friends of Singer Square Park to expand youth and community programming at Singer Square. And then the last two were sort of micro grants, one for Discovery Pathways and its South Philadelphia based youth rowing team, and the Schuylkill Center for Environmental Education for their annual Earth Month community event. As photographed here, during Bartram's Spring Fest, I participated in my first live radio broadcast with WURD, which was very exciting. And last on this list, we held a contractor outreach event for minority and women-owned businesses in partnership with Gilbane, our contractor for the TerraPower Isotopes project. We had a very busy month as it relates to our Career Connected Learning initiative. We held and participated in several student-facing events aimed at exposing students to career pathways aligned with future Bellwether District careers. Importantly, many of the schools engaged were South and Southwest Philly schools, including John Bartram High School, South Philadelphia High School, and Universal on Reed Charter School. Next. So we were excited to host our third annual middle school spring break internship. So as many of you know, we annually host a high school internship, which is about to kick off next week. That's aimed at rising juniors and seniors in high school. We also, as of 3 years ago, host a middle school version of that internship program, which is a paid immersive experience for a group of eighth grade students. This year, we hosted a group of 6 8th graders from South Philadelphia School, Delaplane McDaniel. The students learned all about our project and a variety of careers in real estate and construction. They also participated in professional development sessions and hands-on activities geared towards that middle school audience. And last, wanted to mention that we recently launched the 2026 application for the Bellwether District Community Investment Fund. So this is a new grant opportunity that we'll offer on an annual basis, supporting community-driven, but importantly also community-selected initiatives across South and Southwest Philadelphia. So eligible organizations can apply for funding up to $25,000 through this Friday, June 26th. We are considering an extension to the application, but for now, please do get your applications if you're an eligible organization in by this Friday. More information on that fund and eligibility can be found on our website at thebellwetherdistrict.com/community. So again, we encourage you to apply and reach out via the website if you have any questions. Great. So from there, I'm just sharing my contact information. Again, feel free to contact us via the website or reach out to me directly. I will ask my colleague James to take down the slide so we can open it up for Q&A. Great. All right, so I'm going to start with a question about bicycle and pedestrian access. The question is this infrastructure planned? When will it be developed? How are we considering connecting into neighboring assets like, Passyunk Avenue and the Navy Yard? I will turn that over to Amanda.
Sure, I can take that. So, multimodal connections are a really big focus of our campus. It's something we've given a lot of thought to, and we're actively still working with the city to expand connections. So, right now we're focused on phase one of our development, which borders Vere Ave and Maiden Lane. We are expanding the right of way along our property so that we can introduce buffered two-way bike lanes along Fair Avenue. So I don't know if you can put the slide back up. James actually looking at the site, and I'm happy to talk through that. But so right now on Bear Avenue, it's currently a one-way southbound. So we're going to be converting that to two-way along the side that is along our site. We're going to be adding the two-lane bike lane, and then we'll be restriping Bear Avenue down to 28th Street, where we'll have a bike lane on the road, which will then connect into Passyunk Avenue, which then you can take kind of north and south, east and west. And then coming southbound from the north to our site, as I said, 34th Street currently dead ends into our site. We are really focused on that connection north because that does take you directly to the Schuylkill River Trail extension, which currently, the new kind of Riverwalk Bridge, it comes down along the river, and it kind of dead ends to the Grays Ferry Crescent Park, which you can take the new bridge, you can enter the Grays Ferry Crescent Park, and then you can take the SRT to Grays Ferry or Wharton Street, which then will lead directly down 34th into our campus. And then once you enter our campus, that's where we also have two-way protected, grade separated bike lanes. So this is something, again, that we're very focused on, and we're kind of excited to provide new connectivity, from the north to the south. And then Mia, I'll give it back to you.
Great. Thank you, Amanda. Another question, what actions will the Bellwether District take to minimize air pollution with clients like TerraPower Isotopes and their operations on site? Can I turn that over to Amelia?
Sure, you can. Sorry, getting my video and audio going up. Absolutely happy to address that question. I don't know how specific the question was to TerraPower Isotopes. I will just note that they are an extremely high tech kind of future focused company that we don't expect to be an emitter. But like speaking generally to, and we can't like speak specifically to their operations, but speaking generally, so first of all tenants of the Bellwether District will be subject to state and local regulations. And I think those of you who are familiar with Philadelphia know that Philadelphia has very stringent standards from an emission and air emissions standpoint, as well as other, key regulatory indicators. So that will be, that is in effect for our site. We are within the city limits of Philadelphia completely. So not only will state DEP regulations, which are kind of delegated by the federal EPA, be in effect, but also City of Philadelphia, Department of Health, AMS, all of the relevant regulations will be in effect as it relates to air, water, earth, etc. A couple of site-wide things I just want to reiterate. I think they were mentioned earlier, but the question is, what are we at the Bellwether District doing to not only remove the refinery and its associated infrastructure, which, as was mentioned earlier, accounted for 16% of air emissions in Philadelphia, but also build a better, more sustainable future on the site. We are building all of our buildings to LEED certifiable standards, and that includes the buildings in the Innovation Campus. We are building EV-ready infrastructure, and we expect that to be utilized quite a bit. And then we're planting 10,000 trees. We planted over 1,000 so far. In a site where there was almost no trees. There was like one tree on the site. So I think that in and of itself, just mitigating the urban heat island effect. And in particular, South and Southwest Philly has the lowest tree coverage of the city of Philadelphia. So we're not only, working to mitigate that urban heat island effect on our site, but the tree plantings that we're doing on our site should have a beneficial impact for the surrounding community. And then finally, looking at sustainable stormwater management practices as well as CO2 absorption assets like bioswales. are going to be present throughout the site. And as Amanda alluded to in her presentation, the Innovation Campus will really be focused on that, green infrastructure, ensuring that there are green spaces, and also, I think multimodal access plays a role here as well. Well, there certainly will be accommodations for all forms of vehicular access, which is necessary for a commercial development. We are being thoughtful about the fact that many of the employees, I think particularly on the Innovation Campus, may want to bike to work, right? May want to get to work via public transit. So we are being thoughtful about those connections and ensuring that, whether it's large scale or small scale, bit by bit, we are mitigating, potential impact, as well as removing and reducing, what was a massive emissions related producer in Philadelphia. Thanks for the question.
Thanks, Amelia. We are at 7 p.m., so we're going to take the all the questions that we have currently in the chat, and then again, anything we did not get to tonight, we will post to our website following the meeting. So appreciate your questions. Our next one, I'm going to turn it over to Juliana. Juliana, I think you covered some of this during your presentation tonight, but we have a question about soil management. How is the Bellwether District ensuring that lead levels in the soil meet EPA standards after earth moving work is completed?
Sure. So yeah, as I talked about, the lead or any constituents that are present in soil, but our primary constituents of concern are really lead and then petroleum related VOCs. As I mentioned, we sample the soil prior to moving it, and then we plan for those locations. So soils that have concentrations that are not appropriate for reuse in a landscaped area where people could come into contact with them are placed in locations that will in the future be under an engineering control. So a soil cap that is either a roadway, a sidewalk, or a building slab. And then after all the soil is placed and our construction is complete, we come back and we sample in those areas that are not under an engineering control to confirm that the soil that we placed there, that we planned to place there, that based on our pre-movement sampling was okay to place there. We come back and we sample that soil more frequently to make sure that the concentrations are okay. To date, all of that sort of post-movement, post-construction sampling has come out acceptable, but if for any reason we detected an elevated concentration, soil that wasn't appropriate to be in a landscaped area, what we would do then is come in and remove it and replace it with soil that is acceptable. I'll hand it back to you, Mia.
Thanks, Juliana. Our next question, can we define the term cross-docking? Kurt, can you answer that one?
Yes, and apologies for using some industry jargon there. That's a great question. So, a cross-dock building is typically when there are overhead doors that are on either side of the building and they're positioned directly across from each other. And that's what gives you the cross-dock setup in an industrial building.
Great, thank you. Next one. Will the amenity building exclusively serve your tenants, or will it be open to the general public? Amanda, can I turn that over to you?
Yep, thanks, Mia. So the amenity building is a tenant amenity. So it is going to be exclusively used for TBI and then our future tenants of the property. But over time, as the campus grows, we do anticipate building additional retail square footage. And we are exploring opportunities to open that up to the general public. So please stay tuned on that.
Great, thank you. And then I will take our final question before we wrap up tonight. Question on if you're a vendor that's interested in working with us, how do you get on our bidder list for the project? So on our website at thebellwetherdistrict.com, as part of our contact us form, there is a drop down for work with us. So if you're a business that's interested in connecting and potential opportunities at Bellwether, please fill out that form and we'll be in touch to get you introduced to the project. So with that, thank you so much for joining us this evening. We look forward to seeing you at our next community meeting in September. Have a good night.